talk to the shooter himself.
And he never indicated to you that he needed medical attention?
No.
All right. Matter of fact, he said as a result of the push, we heard, he emphasized that you all said you were dazed. He said, no, just slightly dazed.
He said just slightly, and I believe he asked specifically in reference to head injuries if he hit his head.
Right. You didn't see any reason for medical attention?
No, not immediate.
And photographs were taken of any injuries?
That's correct.
You have a moment, Your Honor? I have no further questions.
All right, anything else from Mr. Trubin? All right. Thank you, sir. You may step down.
Thank you, Judge.
State, please call your next witness.
Mead, right?
Technician Heather Mead.
Swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? Yes, I do. Thank you.
Right this way. Go ahead and have seats. We'll have to voice the court, please.
Good morning, Pete. Will you please state your full name?
Good morning. My name is Natasha Heather Mead.
And who do you work for?
I work for Pinellas County Sheriff's Office.
How long have you worked for the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office?
Just entered my 19th year.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Prior to working with the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office, did you have any other technical support work?
No, I did not.
Okay. So your total time as a forensic specialist has been with the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office?
That is correct.
All right. And tell us, as a forensic specialist, what are your duties and responsibilities?
My duties and responsibilities are to respond to a crime scene. I am to document that crime scene as it is upon my arrival through photographs or video documentation. We are also responsible for evidence collection and preservation and processing techniques of that evidence to bring it to you in court.
And did you do that in this case?
Yes, I did.
All right. And did you go to the scene?
No, I did not go to the scene.
All right. Were you called to the Dunedin substation?
Yes, I was.
And what was the purpose of you going to the Dunedin substation?
The purpose was to process the suspect in a homicide investigation.
All right. And you were called upon to collect evidence and take photographs of an individual that was at that substation?
Yes, I was.
His name was Michael Drejka.
That is correct.
He's the defendant in this case.
Yes, he is.
Would you look around the courtroom? Do you see Mr. Drejka in the courtroom today?
Yes, I do.
Will you please point him out and, for the record, describe an article of clothing he's wearing?
Mr. Drejka is wearing a gray jacket and a lavenderish, pinkish shirt and tie.
Don't look to me, I'm colorblind. All right. Let the record reflect the witness has identified the defendant.
It shall so reflect.
You went to the substation on what date?
July 19th.
Do you recall the time you arrived?
The time upon my arrival was 2026.
All right. And for us that can't convert well the military time, what is that?
8:26 p.m.
All right. So at 8:26 p.m. And did you eventually meet with the defendant?
Yes, I did.
And did you take photos of the defendant?
Can I go ahead and interject something here?
Yes.
At the time, I was a field training officer.
Okay. Yeah, I'll correct that. Were you present when photos were taken?
Yes, I was.
All right. You were training an individual at the time who actually took the photos?
Yes, I was.
All right. And that's not unusual.
No, it's not.
Okay. So you were a field training officer?
Yes, I was.
And what does that mean?
Field training officer is I'm responsible for when people are newly hired in the forensic science section to teach them our job and to make sure they are documenting and photographing and doing their job appropriately to our standards.
Right. And so when you had this, and who was that individual?
The last name was Ban Savage.
Yeah. And you were there when those photos were taken?
Yes, I was.
Right. Prior to coming and testifying, have I asked you to take a look at a certain number of photographs?
Yes, you did. Excuse me.
I'm going to approach you with what's been marked as State Exhibit 26. It's a composite exhibit, A through T, numerous photos. And if you could please take a look at those photos. First ones are A through H. Do you recognize what those photos are?
Yes, I do.
And are they fair and accurate depiction of Mr. Drejka on July 19th?
Yes, they are.
We're now looking at I through P. If you would take a look at those photos.
Okay.
Do they fairly and accurately depict the body and condition of Mr. Drejka as he appeared at that substation on July 19th?
Yes, they do.
And finally, we're looking at pictures Q through T, the last exhibit. Do you recognize those pictures?
Yes, I do.
Were you present when they were taken?
Yes, I was present.
Do they fairly and accurately depict the condition of Mr. Drejka's body on that date?
Yes, I do.
Did you also make did you also make observations of his condition as those pictures were taken?
Yes, I did.
Visual observation?
Yes, I did.
This time, Your Honor, we'd offer an evidence. State's Exhibit 26, A through T. Any objection, defense? No, Your Honor. You're admitted. And if I may, Your Honor, I have you step down. She may step down. I think these photos were taken at the end of the day, at the end of the, before he was permitted to go home, correct?
That's correct.
All right. Let's start with, he had already been interviewed by law enforcement.
Yes.
All right. We're going to show this first photo, groups of photos. Could you tell us what we're looking at in photograph A? Can everybody see the photos? All right. Photograph A.
Photograph A is just a full frontal photograph of Mr. Drejka's face.
All right. Photograph B.
B is just a profile of the right side of Mr. Drejka.
Photograph C.
Photograph C is a left profile photograph of Mr. Drejka.
Photograph D.
Photograph D is just the back of Mr. Drejka's head.
Did you notice, when you made your visual observations, did you notice any injuries on his face?
No, I did not.
Did he complain of any injuries on his face?
No, he did not.
All right. What are we looking at and by face also the back of the head, the sides of the head, that type of thing?
That's correct. He did not complain of anything.
All right. What are we looking at in photographs E?
Photograph E is a full frontal to include head to toe of Mr. Drejka and his attire.
All right. And those are the clothing that he had on at that substation on
Yeah.
that day.
Yes, that's correct.
What are we looking at in photograph F?
Photograph F is going to be a full right side view of Mr. Drejka to include his attire as well.
Photograph G?
Photograph G is a left full side of Mr. Drejka.
All right. And photograph H?
Photograph H is just the entire head to toe back side of Mr. Drejka.
And in those pictures, are there any injuries that you know?
No visible injuries.
No. Let's now take a look at another grouping of photos. All right, photograph I. There appears to be an abrasion to his arm, correct?
That is correct.
All right, and what arm is that?
That's the right arm.
All right. And that was caused as a result of the incident?
So I was told, yes.
Okay. Now we're gonna look at any other injuries on that arm that you noticed at that time?
Not at that time, no.
Okay. Let's look at Jay. What are we looking at there?
Jay is a photograph of the upper right arm, just to include some tattoos that are on his arm.
All right. Any injuries to that area?
To the upper arm,
Yes.
no, but just above the right elbow, there appears to be what I would call an abrasion.
Can you point that out to the jury?
Yes, it is right here.
All right. Is that the same abrasion we see in photograph I?
Yes, it is.
All right. And could you point that out for the jury?
In photograph I or J?
In photograph I.
May I go to the other side?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay. Photograph I is right here.
What are we looking at in photograph K?
Photograph K is going to be the lower outer portion of the right arm. And it appears that there might be additional road rash or a strawberry.
Okay. And that's on the right arm?
Yes, the lower right arm.
Okay. What are we looking at in photograph L?
Photograph L is going to be the outer right side of the lower right leg. And it's just to include a tattoo.
All right. Any injuries that you noticed on the legs?
No.
Photograph M.
Photograph M is going to be 2 tattoos, 1 tattoo on each lower arm.
Okay. Any injuries noted on those arms?
No visible injuries, no.
Photograph N.
Photograph N is going to be the lower, if I believe correctly, is the lower right arm of Mr. Drejka.
Other than the tattoo, any injuries noted on that arm?
Nothing visible.
All right. In photograph O.
Photograph O is going to be the right wrist of Mr. Drejka.
In photograph P.
Photograph P is going to be the right wrist of Mr. Drejka.
All right. There appears to be redness around the wrist area.
That is correct. I was informed that redness was due to handcuffs. And if I can just kind of clarify something in photograph N, I'm not 100% certain which arm that is.
Okay, but it is one of the arms, and there does not appear to be any injury.
That is correct.
We're now going to take a look at some point in time, did you have him remove his shirt?
Yes, I did.
All right. And what are we looking at in photograph Q?
Photograph Q is Mr. Drejka's bare back.
All right. Did you notice any injuries, or did he complain of any injuries to his back?
Not to his back, no.
All right. Can't complain of an injury to his arm, correct?
To his shoulder.
Okay. Now, we're now looking at photograph R.
Photograph R is just kind of the upper right quadrant of Mr. Drejka's torso.
Any injury that you noted to that area? Any visible injury?
No visible injuries were noted.
Photograph S.
Photograph S is just to include a general photograph of Mr. Drejka's right side and that right shoulder.
Did you notice any visible injury to that area?
No, I did not.
And photograph T.
Photograph T is just kind of a backward shot of the right shoulder of Mr. Drejka.
Any injury noted, any visible injury noted to that area of Mr. Drejka's body?
No visible injuries were noted.
Thank you. I have no further questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And cross-examination, Mr. Camarena.
Thank you. Ma'am, correct me if I'm wrong, you mentioned the word no visible injuries several times throughout your direct examination, correct?
That's correct, I did.
You're not a paramedic or trained in any medicine or anything like that?
No, I'm not.
All right. And so in terms of no visible injury, there were instances, though, where there was some visible injuries to his right arm, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right. In fact, I think he even said that he complained of pain to his right shoulder.
He did say there was pain in his right, excuse me, in his right shoulder.
Fair enough. In addition to him complaining verbally that there was pain to his right shoulder, did you notice that as he removed his shirt to be able to take a picture of his bare chest, if you will, that he struggled in taking off his shirt? Do you recall that?
I don't know Mr. Drejka, so I don't know how he would struggle. He did express that it was uncomfortable.
But in terms of what you saw, can you describe to the jury, do you recall him actually struggling, not maybe verbalizing the struggle, but struggling in trying to remove the shirt? Do you recall that?
I do not recall that, I'm sorry.
So in terms of State's Exhibit number, I believe this is number 26I through P, and there's no need for you to get up, but 26I through P, and I'm sorry, did I approach? Yes, all right. All right. In terms of the abrasions, you said it was consistent, and K, for example, K, the first question is, you would agree that the initial abrasion, road rash, strawberry, would be on the right forearm, correct? And represented in K.
Yes, that's correct.
All right. And it extends, or at least there's another injury just above the, would that be the elbow as represented in I?
Yes.
All right. And did you take the time to measure the distance between the two injuries at all?
No, I did not.
All right. But in your training and experience, that would be consistent with road rash, or is that what you called it?
Or a strawberry, yes.
Or strawberry, but you did use the word road rash, right?
Yes.
All right. And you had been advised that Mr. Drejka had been, if you will, the victim of a push.
Yes.
That was ascribed to you.
Yes.
All right. If I could have a moment, Judge. Question, ma'am, and I thank you for your patience. In terms of, going back to, again, exhibits number 26A through H, photograph F here. Did you notice anything unusual about the shirt itself, the green shirt, any marks or tears or anything like that you recall?
There's a white substance on the right sleeve, yes.
All right, and photograph F.
That's correct.
But specifically, do you have any independent recollection if there was any holes or tears in that portion of the shirt?
On the sleeve, no.
Okay.
Excuse me.
Do you recall if you personally or the trainee that you were with, if they took a photograph, a close-up photograph of that scuff mark or white mark, or whatever it is that you described on that shirt, do you recall that was done?
Yes, that was done.
Okay. And did you personally take that shirt into evidence?
We did, yes.
All right. The one that was seen in 26F, you did take it into evidence?
Yes.
All right.
The green shirt you're speaking
green
about.
shirt, correct.
Yes, that's correct.
All right. My last question is, do you recall at any point during your encounter with Mr. Drejka, well, first of all, would you agree that he was compliant, cooperative?
Yes, he was.
All right. And do you recall at any point during your encounter with Mr. Drejka that he may have used that same green shirt as a sling, as a makeshift sling to rest his right arm?
Yes, he did.
All right. That's all I have. Thank you.
Briefly, I think it was brought out, you're not a medical doctor.
No, I am not.
But, did he ever complain to you that he needed medical treatment?
No, he did not.
Did he ever complain to you that he needed to see a nurse?
No, he did not.
And if that had been done, you all would have made it available, correct?
Absolutely.
All right. You're mandated to do that.
Pardon?
You're mandated to do that.
Yes,
correct?
we are.
All right. I don't know.
Thank you, ma'am. You may step down.
Thank you.
State, please call your next witness.
Roy Bedard.
swear or affirm the evidence you are about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do. Right this way. Go ahead and have a seat. Speaking aloud. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Good morning. Can you please turn to the jury and state your first and last name and spell them for the court reporter?
My first name is Roy, R-O-Y, last name Bedard, B-E-D-A-R-D.
Okay. And how are you currently employed, sir?
I am self-employed.
Okay. And what do you do for a living?
I'm a police trainer.
Okay. And when you say a police trainer, in the past, have you been called upon to give expert opinions regarding use of force and defensive tactics?
Yes.
And is there a difference between those two terms, use of force and defensive tactics?
There is. Do you want me to explain that?
Yes, please.
Use of force is generally the philosophy that governs defensive tactics. Defensive tactics would be the specific skills that law enforcement officers are taught and learn with respect to how to throw a punch, for example, or a kick, or to fire a firearm, or to swing a baton, or to use pepper spray. But that's all couched inside of a model that tells us the appropriateness of those defensive tactics, and that would be considered use of force.
Okay. And we're going to get into all your background training experience in a second. About how many times have you testified as an expert regarding use of force and defensive tactics?
I think about 25.
Okay. And have you testified as an expert in the United States?
Yes.
Have you testified as an expert outside the United States?
No.
Okay. With respect to your educational background, can you please tell the members of the jury about your educational background?
Yes, I have a Bachelor's of Science in Criminology from the Florida State University. I have a master's degree in educational psychology and a PhD in educational psychology with a focus on human performance with respect to sport exercise and performance of professional people like law enforcement officers and military personnel.
Okay. And when you're talking about the performance of military personnel and law enforcement officers, can you tell the members of the jury a little bit more about that, about your doctorate?
Yes. In psychology, I think most people are more commonly aware of clinical psychologists who deal with people who oftentimes aren't well. A performance psychologist deals with people who are well and oftentimes very well. We deal with Olympic athletes. We deal with, as I said, military personnel, special operations, law enforcement, SWAT teams. We also deal with actors and lawyers and a variety of different people who are in the business of getting better, if you will, at their game. And so we deal with issues like anxiety and maintaining mental control during situations of high intensity and high pressure.
Let's talk about your law enforcement background. Can you explain to the members of the jury your law enforcement background?
Yes. I started in law enforcement at the Academy in 1986. I was a police officer first at the Florida State University Police Department. I did that until 1990. In 1990, I went to the Tallahassee Police Department and worked there full-time until 1996. I stayed with the Tallahassee Police Department until 2015 as a reserve officer. During the period between 1996 and 2015, I had started my own company doing police training, developing police products, and providing consultation worldwide. Subsequent to that, I'm now currently employed with the Tallahassee Community College Police Department as an officer there, a reserve officer.
Okay. And with respect to training, you train law enforcement officers, you indicated?
Yes.
Okay. Are you considered to be a subject matter expert?
Yes.
Okay. And that in the state of Florida?
Yes.
Okay. And what do you consider to be a subject matter expert in?
Use of force, defensive tactics, police procedures, police practices, things like that.
Are you involved in setting the curriculum within the state of Florida for use of force and defensive tactics for law enforcement officers?
Law enforcement and corrections, yes.
Okay. And what does that entail? When you're setting the curriculum, what are you doing for the state of Florida?
So the Florida Department of Law Enforcement has what's called a Criminal Justice Standards and Training Commission. If I refer to it again, I'll simply say CJSTC. This organization is responsible for bringing together talent throughout the state of Florida, identifying subject matter experts who know things about law enforcement generally based on education, training, and experience. And whether that curriculum has to do with pulling over motor vehicles or arrest techniques or the more specific things like use of force and defensive tactics or pursuit driving, those individuals come together as subject matters or SMEs, and they write, usually from the ground up, a curriculum. And then from time to time, every couple of years, it is reviewed again by the CJSTC. We're brought back together to review any changes or updates that perhaps might need to be made to professionalize our law enforcement and correctional officers in the state of Florida.
Okay. So you're a subject matter expert for use of force, correct?
Yes.
Defensive tactics?
Yes.
All right. Instructor techniques as well?
Yes.
And have you been a subject matter expert for the Department of Homeland Security?
I have.
Have you been a lead instructor for classes involving use of force and defensive tactics outside the United States?
Yes.
And have you ever written any training manuals regarding the subject matter that you're going to be testifying to?
Yes.
Do you know just approximately how many training manuals or publications you've written?
Well, training manuals, I think I probably have written 13 or 14. Publications, I may have as many as 20.
Now, have you taught use of force and defensive tactics both in the United States and abroad?
Yes.
Have you, and there's no reason to go through all the conferences, have you been to many conferences and been a guest speaker and a guest lecturer in the same field that we're going to be discussing?
Yes.
Are you a member of any organizations?
Yes.
Okay, what organizations? Again, you don't have to name all of them, but name ones that would be relevant to the testimony you're going to be giving.
I'm a member of the National Sheriff's Association, the International Association of Chiefs of Police. Perhaps in a performance environment, it might be worth mentioning that I'm a member of the Association for Applied Sports Psychology. It's probably the ones that are relevant to my testimony today.
Are you a member of the NRA?
Yes?
Yeah. Now, have you testified or been a consultant for both the state and defense?
Yes.
Have you testified in front of grand juries in the state of Florida?
Yes.
Have you testified in front of grand juries regarding self-defense, use of force, defensive tactics in states outside of Florida?
Yes.
Have you testified in federal court within the state of Florida?
Yes.
And again, regarding everything that we're going to be discussing during your testimony, correct?
Yes.
For the state, the defense, and plaintiffs, just approximately, how many times have you been consulted regarding the expertise that you're going to be talking about?
It's hard to estimate. I think it's around 300.
Have you been involved in reviewing police reports regarding use of force, justifiable use of deadly force, non-deadly force, things of that nature?
Yes.
And how many reports or how many cases do you think you've been involved in with respect to that particular aspect?
As a independent consultant or also as a police officer?
Let's do both.
Okay, as a police officer, I was reviewing many use of force and defensive tactics reports. I was the chairman of what we called our use of force and defensive tactics committee at that time, and all of the police reports that came in from the field passed through our hands so that we could review what our officers were doing, see if there were any problems, make improvements in the way that we were training and things like that. If you ask me a number, I don't know how many times that is, but it happened daily, where we would receive use of force reports. As a private consultant, perhaps it's best to stick to the number 300, where somebody has actually sourced me and has asked me to look at a case where somebody has used force, whether it was a private civilian, a security officer, a police officer. But again, it's a general guess, but I think I'm around 300 cases reviewed.
Okay. Do you also work as a consultant on some television shows, law enforcement related?
Yes.
Okay. And what's the reason that you're used as a consultant on those shows?
Probably because I have a good Rolodex. I know all the police departments across the country, and when Hollywood is looking to do some type of a law enforcement related show, they want somebody that can not only give them advice on where the show might best be played, but also perhaps help make some introductions. So I'm sourced for that, and I've been doing that probably 15 to 20 years.
Okay. For some television shows, are you asked to consult regarding use of force tactics, things of that nature?
Sometimes, typically, if we're producing a show, my side of it is education. I am an educator. And I think allowing people to understand what law enforcement officers do is critically important. I haven't found a stronger or better tool than television to be able to do that. There are occasions during the periods of production where law enforcement officers use force, and perhaps the production company wants my opinion as to whether or not it should be shown, or any complications that may be associated with it later on down the road from a legal opinion that an attorney may hold with respect to something that's being aired. So usually I'll be consulted and offer a basic opinion to the production company before we release things.
And would you consider yourself well-versed in the laws in the state of Florida regarding justifiable use of deadly force?
Yes.
In fact, that's part of the subject matter that you testify to regularly as an expert, correct?
Yes.
Let's talk about your involvement in this case. Were you asked to review documents, police reports, things of that nature?
Yes.
Were you asked to review videos in this case?
Yes.
Were you asked to review a video of the shooting?
Yes.
Were you asked to review a video that shows the victim in this case, Markeis McGlockton, exiting his vehicle and walking into the store with his son?
Yes.
Okay. Did you review that?
I did.
Did you review the video footage of Markeis inside the store with his son?
Yes.
Did you review the footage of Markeis McGlockton leaving the store where there was an altercation between the defendant in this case and his girlfriend, Britany Jacobs?
I did.
Okay. And eventually that led to the shooting, correct?
Yes.
Did you have an opportunity to review the statement that the defendant gave to the detectives from the Pinellas County Sheriff's Office?
Yes.
Did you watch it as the video recording, read the transcript, or both?
I did both.
When you were reviewing the defendant's statements, was there some terminology that caught your eye, so to speak?
Yes.
Okay. What was the terminology that the defendant used that was important for the testimony that you're going to give?
I noticed a lot of what I like to refer to as jargon, police talk, things that law enforcement officers say. For example, in one case he used the term 21-foot rule. That's something that has been talked about and studied in law enforcement circles for 30 years. It's unusual for average people to know about that. He used a concept, I think, called force multiplier, typically a military term, but it did catch my ear because my curiosity is what kind of training background he might have that he would be speaking in this kind of language. I don't remember if he used the term force continuum, but it occurred to me during the interview that that's actually, in one respect, what I think he was referring to.
When you said force multiplier, maybe you thought he was referring to force continuum?
Yes.
Okay. Let's talk a little bit about the terminology that he used. Force multiplier, 21-foot rule, we're going to talk about that in great detail in a little bit. Are those terms also associated with the greater umbrella of threat assessment?
Yes.
All right. Can you tell the members of the jury what threat assessment is?
So threat assessment is being able to observe what's going on in an environment and to identify threats through a period of what we call orientation, trying to understand what things may harm you or harm somebody else. Of course, as an average person, the threats may be different than from a uniformed police officer who's assigned to protect individuals and be aware not only of threats that may confront them, but may confront others. So it is an orientation to environmental cues, essentially, that gives a person a more full understanding of what they should attend to during any period of time.
Okay. And when we're talking about threat assessment, are there, for lack of a better word, are there 4 terms that you would use to help explain what threat assessment is?
Your Honor, can we approach? Yes.
do a little bit of legal analysis here, so we'll give you a 10-minute break. All right, very good. We'll take a 10-minute break.